Hello, my dear friend. Welcome here. The video that I originally had planned for this week failed miserably, so I thought instead of sitting around and being super bummed about that, I would channel all of my energy into learning how to knit a hat on my knitting machine. If you watched my last video where I tried to make socks, you know that I did not have the best of time with that, but I learned a bunch, and I think that this will be different. I think I know enough that I won't completely struggle throughout the whole thing, but I could be wrong. This time, instead of using that sock yarn that I just bought and definitely need to not hoard, note to future Darcy, I'll be using this big ol' thing of cotton. This is yarn that I would typically use for weaving, but I thought it would be super cool if I knit a bunch of things in plain white cotton and then dyed them later on in a separate video. I already went ahead and knit a sample of this yarn, so I know that it works, and it feels super cozy and nice. It feels like one of those old cotton blankets my grandma would have had on her bed. It's really nostalgic. And if I'm being honest, I live in Texas and it's about to be summer, so I do not need a wool hat anyway. The book I'm using for this pattern is the Passap Handbook Beginner Course Volume 1 by Bernadette Ernakovich. I haven't seen this one online for free anywhere, but if I find it, I'll put a link in the description. The hat that I'll be making is the ribbed hat starting on page 5. This is the first pattern in this book, so I probably should have started with this instead of the socks, but oh well. Okay, let's get started. Let me not forget to close the bed like I did last time. It says to put 70 needles on each bed in 1-to-1 division. Then I put both locks on in and the stitch size to 3 and knit 1 row. I just realized that I don't have the extension plate on and I don't want to drop my locks on the floor, so let me just add that. I feel like I probably should have 2 of them, but I only have 1, so it is what it is. Okay, now it says to set the locks to CX and the stitch size to 3.5. I only had 1 black stripper in instead of the orange strippers. Whoops. Now knit 2 rows. Now both locks to in, stitch size stays the same, and knit 1 row. I feel like this is going to give me trouble because the stitch size is 3.5, and I feel like it's going to need to be 4 for this to work, but we'll see. I am so surprised that that worked. I really thought it was going to get stuck. Now it says to keep the locks on in, but set the stitch size to 5.75. Now I'm going to set my row counter to 0 and knit 34 rows. Okay, we've got our first mistake, or at least the first mistake that I've noticed. This loop didn't knit, and I looked and I can see that the one before didn't pull all the way through the last loop, so I'm just gonna fix that. I feel like this may have been more than one issue because that is a really loose stitch, but whatever, and I'm just gonna pull that loop back through. I'm going to tug down on it a little bit just to kind of even out those loops. I don't see anything else hugely glaring, so I'm just going to keep going for now. Actually, just kidding, I literally wasn't paying attention, so I knit more than I was supposed to. I actually don't think it matters because this hat calls for stripes and I'm not going to do stripes, so really I think I'm just supposed to knit to 160 stitches. I'm now at row count 160. Now it says that I need to transfer all of the stitches on the back bed to the needles in working position on the front bed. To do that, I need to turn the racking handle 1 full turn to the left. This moves the back bed stitches to be directly across from the ones on the front bed. And now I transfer them. If you'd like an in-depth explanation of how to transfer stitches between the beds, check out this video I did previously. There's a link in the cards and in the description. Okay, now all those stitches are transferred. I need to take all of the back bed stitches out of work. Now it says I need to take stitches off of one needle and transfer them to the next needle and do that all across. It seems crazy to me to have 4 loops on a single needle, but that's what it said to do. Just kidding, I was supposed to knit 2 rows before I did this. So I'm just taking all of those stitches off and putting them back where they belong. Okay, now I'm gonna knit those 2 rows. Several things went wrong. Firstly, my yarn got stuck because the cone was against the wall and got pinched and couldn't flow. And secondly, I didn't change to the black strippers now that I'm working on a single bed. So I'm gonna put this lock in GX and try to unravel what just happened. So the first thing is that these loops are off of these needles now. I'm just gonna put those back. And then I'm gonna unravel the rest of the stitches very carefully. See, I just dropped 1. Okay, black strippers in. Let's try that again. The lock kind of jammed when I got to this point. I don't see any immediate damage, but I just want to make sure. I think everything's okay. And again, better that time. Okay, now it is actually time for me to move those stitches over. So each needle should have 2 stitches on it. This is a big gap. Okay, now I knit 2 more rows. Now it says to just take all of the stitches off on a piece of yarn. So I'm gonna pull up kind of a long piece and cut it, thread that onto my double-eyed tool, and transfer the stitches onto the yarn. Okay, so here it is. I think it may be a bit large. I'm gonna sew it up, and it says to fold a triple cuff. I don't know if, I guess that means fold it up twice or 3 times, and then we'll see if it fits. Maybe it's supposed to be huge. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch this up, but before I do that, I'd just like to ask, if you've made it to this point in the video, would you mind giving me some feedback? You can message me directly. I think you can do that on YouTube, or leave it in the comments. I'd just really like to know if the content I have been making so far has been working for you, or if there's anything you'd like to change or see me try. I just want to do better all the time. So thank you for doing that, and I'll see you when I have this hat on my head. Hello, good morning. It is the next day and we have ourselves a hat. Overall, I think this was a super easy thing to do, and to be honest, if I were to recommend a project for a beginner on their machine, it would be this one. I definitely should have done this before I did the socks, not that I regret doing that, but this was so much easier. You don't have to fiddle with the pushers or transferring a bunch of stitches at once. It was just a fairly straightforward project. I will say, however, that this hat is not without its issues. I dropped 2 stitches when I was moving them across to a different needle, and my hand sewing skills are not great. So there is a big, horrible seam in the back. None of those things are a huge deal to me, but what is kind of a big deal is that in the instructions it said that this hat needs to be triple cuffed, and right now I currently have it folded over 1, 2, 3, 4 times, 4 or 5 times. In the pattern, it said that this hat needed to work out to be just over 15 inches long, and this one is pushing 18 or more. Especially on me, since I have a small head and no hair, this pentuple cuff situation is not my best look. So I'm gonna get started on the next one, and then we'll see how they compare. So I think this time I'm going to do just about everything the same, except that for the main knitting, I'm going to change the stitch size from 5.75 to 4.75, and then I'm only going to knit 140 rows instead of 160 like I did last time. Oh yeah, another thing is that I definitely do need that second extension plate. This is as far as I can push the lock over without it getting stuck because the back lock wants to fall off of the bed. So I'll be looking for that. If you know anyone who's settling their single extension plate, please let me know. Okay, that's 140. I think I'm gonna take a little tea break. This is kind of like an arm workout. Who knew that fiber crafts could be such a physical activity?
$3,000 whoop-hoos later.
I am in a fantastic mood. I just got a call with some really great news that I have been waiting on for weeks. I'm not ready to talk about it publicly, but I just want you to know that I am having a great day now. I'm going to continue transferring my stitches and thinking about my good news. Okay, now I have the black strippers in, and I'm gonna knit 2 rows. Now I'm going to move every other stitch to the needle on the right of it. So at this point, I think it probably would have been better if I would have upped the stitch size back to what it told me to before, the 5.75, because it's really hard to move those stitches over with the stitch size that I have now. Of course, there's still time to unravel those 2 rows that I just did and change the stitch size, but I just don't want to. I'm going to keep going. I think I will up the stitch size on the next 2 rows though. Okay, actually, I know that this isn't going to knit. The stitches are just too tight and the needles aren't going to be able to move up and down through the loops. So I am going to undo the work that I just did and unravel those 2 rows like I just said I wasn't going to do.
Please hold.
I've just finished transferring all of the stitches back to the needles they were on before, and now I'm just going to unravel the last 2 rows. I'm gonna change the stitch size back to 5.75 and knit those 2 rows again. Okay, now I'm gonna transfer those stitches again like I did before to the needle next to it. It is much easier now that I have those bigger stitches. Now I'm gonna knit the final 2 rows. It worked. Okay, here's hat number 2. It is much shorter this time, let's see. So this is the new one. You can see that it's quite a bit shorter. I hope that this time I'll only have to turn it up 2 or 3 times. Something that I don't like, and I didn't like on the other hat, is that when you're getting towards the end and leaving the gaps between the needles, you get these like floats in between. It's not as noticeable when you scrunch it all up, but I still don't really like the look of the cinched top. I think most hats have that, I'm just being picky. Okay, here's hat number 2. This one is actually only folded up 3 times. It is much shorter than the first hat. I think I did a better job of stitching up the sides this time, even though it is still not beautiful. This hat also feels a little bit more substantial because the stitch size is smaller, so it's not as loose and stretchy. I am going to try to find a different pattern to knit for the hats that I want to eventually dye. I don't really like the way that I have to seam up the side. I'm not great at the hand stitching, and my machine is a double bed machine, so I'm wondering if I cannot just knit a tube and then come up at the top in the way that I do the socks. Anyway, I had a great time knitting these hats, and if you're just getting started on your knitting machine journey, I highly suggest knitting a 1-to-1 rib hat. It was super easy breezy, minus the little hiccups and the hand sewing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you are interested in more knitting machine videos, I have a playlist of ones that I've done so far. And if you're interested in coming along as I experiment with more hobbies and fiber crafts, I make a new video every week. Thank you for subscribing and sticking around. See you next time.